I will never do justice by trying to introduce people that have a distinguished and long list of accomplishments, so I'll take the easy way out and not do that. I hope that you'll know that they're already well-renowned in their various fields, and I'm sure if they feel that they'd like to do so, they can add on their own descriptions of what they're doing. So I'd like to instead use our time to jump right in. And what I'm going to do is talk a little bit, instead of some of this concept of smart cities, I do want to talk also about the broader context of how do we want to think about artificial intelligence and humanity, or artificial intelligence and society. And we were chatting a little bit off stage about this concept. Well, we cannot even talk about smart cities without, of course, first remembering that it's all people, that society and humanity built by people. So we're going to cover that. But I'm going to start with an informal show of hands, because I always like to try and take the temperature of the audience. So I'm going to start with, how many people feel that AI, broadly defined, you can define it in whatever way you personally feel about it, will be more positive than negative? So if you're generally optimistic about AI, raise your hand. Okay, and for those brave souls that prefer to be contrarian, if you're generally pessimistic about AI, please raise your hand. Did you put up your hand? Okay, so we're sort of, it's called a hedging strategy here. Okay, and I'm going to take another poll and then we're going to get in. How many people believe in the view, for those that know of the work by Ray Kurzweil and the singularity is near, Ray is a futurist, the singularity is near, this concept of machine intelligence and human intelligence roughly being at parity. How many people believe in the view that the singularity or equivalence to humanity or human intelligence is going to be in 25 years or less? A few. How many, if I change the question to say, how many people believe that AI will inevitably exceed human intelligence, and now the question is just a function of how long it takes? Raise your hand. Interesting. Oh, yeah, wait a second. I was going to say, co-founder of Element AI is saying, I'm not sure I'm in. Okay. Last setup, and then I'm going to go to Wendy here. Canadian research group did a study, an assessment of 18 countries' national AI strategies. Perhaps not surprisingly, almost all of those national AI strategies focused heavily on industrial use cases, on industrial benefit, or to say it differently, economic benefit. There was a significant underrepresentation when it came to inclusion, society, ethics. And so, Dame Wendy, I know this is a topic close to your heart. Inclusivity, society, bias, diversity. I'm going to throw an open-ended question your way and say, how do we think of AI and these human values, and how does that affect the way that you're looking and many of the people that you're advising?
Well, I think first of all that the Canadian research is not wrong, and it isn't wrong that we're looking at industrial use cases, because industry is what makes us tick, right? So we have to be. There's no point in saying, well, we're not going to let industry use AI until we get the ethics sorted. Mm-hmm. Right? That isn't going to work as a question. It takes a long time to work out ethical values. People will say they'll produce ethical frameworks, and there are already some you can see. I won't cite examples, but they're all meta-level things. AI must be for the good. What rubbish! Of course. But how are you going to do that? How are you going to ensure that every piece of AI that's written is only used for the good? Right? It's like saying electricity must be used for good, and yet we know electricity has killed lots of people over time. Motor cars must be used for good, but they kill tons of people. And nobody gave me an ethical test when I took my driving test. Right? So this is I haven't killed anyone yet, but anyway, that was too glib a comment. Sorry. The thing about this is that and you asked the question about the singularity, which is it's a really important question, and we were talking about this beforehand. I don't think we're anywhere near the singularity, but the point is, if we are going to get there, which most of us think we are, we need to be doing this in the right way. Or, as Stephen Hawking said, it will be the end of the human race. Or we'll just become slaves to the machines, neither of which we would like to think our descendants are going to have to deal with.
Okay.
So I would argue, just like we see the kids today saying, what have you done to our planet? You know, with climate change, we've got to sort this out. We can see the problems that that's been causing, and that's centuries of bad, you know, not being conscious of what we're doing. My argument is we have to be conscious of what we're doing. So as we were saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to use your point here, Andreas. We were talking before we came up about how you help a startup develop into a profitable company in a way that is inclusive and taking account of ethical or social responsibilities, I like to call it, and making sure that one way to do that is to make sure that they have a diverse workforce. And if you've got a small number of people in a small company, it's very hard to do that. So we have to have guidance, standards, policies, and some regulation that says you have to take account of these issues. You've got to test. You've got to prove that you have thought about the human consequence, the social consequence of what you're doing. Does that make any sense?
Okay, I'm gonna come back to that in a second, but I want to.
Can I actually just?
Of course, Tekwal, yeah.
To me, I think in one particular area I think is very important for it being inclusive is that in hiring processes, if we actually look at the current hiring process for many companies, we get the data, we use it to train a machine learning algorithm to pick people going forward. Yeah. If there were biases in the current data set, we're going to have a huge problem. The machine learning is going to be even more biased as a result of that. So we're hoping that if somebody was clever, can figure out based on the AI algorithm what kind of biases are there and de-bias it so that the machine is better than human being in picking people. I think that would be very nice for us to do that.
All right, I want to push on this point for a second because it's a question that I always have in my mind, and perhaps some of you are thinking this. To some extent, this idea of we must make sure that we've considered ethics and we've considered bias, we'd all agree, I hope. And bias inherently can also be not wrong. I mean, there are areas of positive bias. You don't loan money to somebody that has a track record of never paying it back. So when people say all bias is wrong, there are times when bias is appropriate. But if we think about when do we need to release things into the wild and learn, and the example that I'd like to use is automobiles had been on the road for decades before there were anti-lock brakes and airbags and seat belts because we learned through very difficult circumstances what wasn't working. In this particular case, how do we think of using the possibilities of AI, recognizing that it will be imperfect? Because sometimes there's a narrative that says we must continue to research and improve in the sort of lab so that it doesn't go wrong in the wild. I'd like to see if there's a thought, and whether it's now or as we go.
Well, I would like to say we have to ensure it's safe. And I use the analogy with aeroplanes because I certainly wouldn't have gone up in one of those early aeroplanes, right? And I wouldn't have actually liked to have flown much in the 1950s or 60s because I don't, you know, now because we've learned from all the crashes. Yes. And generally speaking, with the big example problems we've got at the moment, we know how to build a safe plane and safe environment for it to fly in. Now with cars, it's different because you're actually putting it on the road where there are people and, right? So I think that I personally think we should be very careful about putting automated vehicles in roads where there's cars being driven by people, there's bikes, there's dogs, there's women with prams, there's old people with sticks, right? I just don't think we should mix them up.
Okay.
And I think we can develop these, we can start using them. There are very safe circumstances in which you can use automated vehicles, and you could list all sorts of them.
I mean, an easy thing is segment. Just say this is an AV-only lane.
In fact, in discussion about smart cities, that is one of the things people are talking about, is you separate cars and pedestrians. Yep. So these are the sorts of things I think we should do pragmatically, because we all use the word ethics, as I said before, but ethical principles take a long time to evolve. You don't just do that overnight. And you also have to regulate, so you have to develop laws as well.
All right, so Tekwal, I'm coming to you in your role as chairman of AI Singapore. This is a tough one. So this concept, Wendy just referred to ethics. How do we think of ethics when we have so many different cultural expectations and backgrounds? Is there a future in which ethics are reasonably commonly defined and understood, or should we only try and think about ethics as my ethics, your ethics, her ethics? Because when we talk about ethics, how do we think about them across different humanities and cultures?
So this is really an unplanned question, but I'm going to answer it anyway. So I sort of see there are certain principles that cut across multiple culture and society and country. There might be certain acts that we apply to a specific country and context. So there are two sets of principles that we're going to go about. I believe that we all, as different countries, have to figure out the common sets of ethics that we should all adhere to. For example, we don't spread fake news. To me, this is the thing that everyone will agree that this is the right thing to do. When it comes to context of what is considered, for example, let me give you an example that may be speculative. In Singapore, we really care about not creating the division among the different races. We treasure it a lot. Other countries might treasure it a little less. So we will have this certain principle that apply to that.
Okay.
Come back to this a little bit. I think for me, it's a lot of time, this is the learning process that we have to do. We have to roll it out and try it out, like what Wendy was saying. We're going to do experimentation, what works, what doesn't work. Along the way, we just make it better.
I'm a fan. Okay. I'm going to come back to you on a different point in a second, Tekwa. So, Philippe, I want to try and come at this question, and I'm going to ask Andreas a related question. But with Element AI, you're thinking a lot about adoption and operationalization of AI in enterprises. This concept of it's great to research, it's great to discuss. How can we operationalize and use AI tools and techniques for the benefit of corporations and hopefully ultimately for people? But it's hard. Operationalizing AI, making it usable, is hard.
Yeah, so I mean, in order for all these great ideas to have a real impact, we have to bring them to people. And as you say, it's hard. I mean, when we look at the reason why it's hard, we've identified three that come back whenever we look at these problems. And the first one is that it's hard right now to get AI out of the lab. It tends to get stuck in academia. Second reason is it's hard to scale AI. AI tends to be built in siloed and isolated modules that just break one after the other or are hard to maintain. And the third reason is it's hard sometimes for users and for people to trust AI. Yeah. It's often seen as a black box. It's often seen as a system that gives an answer but doesn't necessarily explain why this answer is there, right? So these are reasons why going from where we are today to AI having a real positive impact in the world is still a journey. And that's partly where we've invested a lot of our time at Element AI, trying to design a set of products, services, and tools that allows us to break through these three barriers. Take it out of the lab, for example, through something like we've developed an AI maturity framework to help our customers, large corporations who actually want to go through that journey, assess how mature they are across a number of different axes, right? A company might have the right strategic vision, but not the right data, right? The data might not be mature enough for deployment. So this is one thing we've been looking at in particular, trying to help get it out of there. And in terms of scaling AI, well, we need AI to grow in maturity towards something that's closer to engineering. And that's something we've been looking into, trying to get a lot of different modules, a lot of different capabilities that implement AI solutions work together efficiently so that they can be deployed and maintained in an effective way. So these are some of the challenges that we definitely need to look at. And if we stop at what we see today, we stop at what the labs can do, and it's a bit misleading. And maybe that's why I raised my hand shakingly a little bit. I don't know how far we are, but we have these challenges ahead of us.
You know, what's interesting is earlier this morning, Deputy Prime Minister Heng announced an initiative led by the Monetary Authority, and SG Innovate is one of the partners with that, to improve trustable AI. Yeah. But I'll share with you the first meeting in which we all, a couple of months ago, sat around the table and said, trustable AI, it's a great thing. We want to be doing that in healthcare and many other areas. And then we said, how do we ensure that AI is trustable? This concept of it's great to discuss, but the practical side of operationalizing this thing called trust is so difficult, and I know that's what you're referring to.
And if you look at it, you can look at the technological issues and challenges around explainable AI, but at the end of the day, trust is a characteristic of the relationship between the user and the system. And it's never going to happen if you don't elevate the users themselves, if you don't make sure that people who are using these systems understand them well enough so that they can understand these explanations. Eventually, the trust becomes transitive because you have good enough practitioners, not necessarily AI experts, but you've elevated the understanding of the system, of machine learning, so that the trust can flow all the way. And at the end of the day, the person that is accountable for a decision made is a human that has understood the explanation of the system well enough that they can transitively pass the trust on.
So Andreas, I want to come to you. You live at the intersection of entrepreneurship, academia, governments. When we think about the role of startups leading into AI and trying to be a positive force for change, for opportunity, but yet these track records are not there yet. That's the very generation of new innovation. How do you see the role of entrepreneurs that you're working with helping move this narrative forward? So Wendy's spoken about positive impact with diversity and inclusion. We've talked about trustable AI. Can entrepreneurs, are entrepreneurs the way forward? Or is this the remit of big companies and entrepreneurs are kind of helping?
No, so what we see, and I totally agree with what you just said, is that it's a real challenge to implement AI and make it operational in companies. And it really cuts across all different functions, all different industries. In any use cases, you will see some kind of AI in the future. And companies really can't take care of all these things. And I mean, you have about 450 people working on AI, and most companies don't have many people. Like if you talk about, like with all these companies, they have maybe 2, 3, they potentially publicly say they have 20 or 100 or 200, but like if you really talk to them, it's not many people there. And if we now talk about trust, about ethical use of AI, about the standardized processes, about bias, you really have to have some experience in that, and that's where startup can help. Because they really productize specific use cases and then go to many companies to really apply their solutions. And that's a catalyst for innovation for many companies in many use cases. Obviously, there are use cases at the core of what companies are doing that they should investigate themselves. But they should focus on these use cases, and the rest should be done by startups. But still, as you say, there are not many startups who really are at a level where we say like global leaders in a startup ecosystem. And I think that's, again, due to the trust, because this technology is pretty new. And there are not enough success cases really for AI being operationalized in business. And you need to build up this like track record of success cases for you to be a trusted partner of a company. That's the challenge of learning systems, that it's really hard to benchmark them in the beginning. Many startups say they use AI without ever using AI, simply to have a higher market valuation. And for companies, it's really hard to see what startups is a good one and which it isn't. And that makes it hard for the rest of the startups who are also the good ones. So I believe that once you have a certain stage, you're really growing heavily, but you need to reach a stage, and that's a really hard job to get there.
Okay, I'm going to do another quick audience poll to frame the next question. One of the big fears for AI is often this concept that it will eliminate huge numbers of jobs and that society will be split because there'll be so many people negatively affected because of loss of jobs. Other people argue there'll be more jobs created, so the net plus, it might be a timing issue, but it's a net plus. For those that think that AI is a job eliminator more so than it is a job creator. So on the negative side, AI is a job eliminator, perhaps a job affector, but maybe a job eliminator.
No, no, no.
Ah, okay.
That you were the
affecting a job for sure,
Everyone, yeah.
but not eliminating. So we can try and maintain some optimism here. But I do want to bridge into this concept now of AI will change jobs. And Wendy, you spend a lot of time thinking about education. I know you've said that if we focus on young kids, that's great, but it's going to take 15 or 20 years for them to sort of get further upstream. How do you see, as an educator, how do you see education, in inverted commas, evolving in the years ahead, either because of AI or perhaps enabled by AI?
You just doubled the question there. So, all right, I'll start with I do think that at last, with what the capability we will have with AI today, the machine learning AI that we're talking about today, can actually bring about a revolution in education in the way we've talked about before, but haven't been able to do. Education actually hasn't really changed forever. We still go into classrooms. We have university classrooms. We go and listen to a person. And so IT has provided tools to use in that, but we haven't actually changed it. And I think that we're not talking about replacing teachers here, and I don't think we're talking about replacing the bricks and mortar in the near term, because of it's actually education is a social thing as well as just the learning piece. But I do think that we will be able to develop what we used to call intelligent tutoring systems, personal tutors, that kids of all ages, and adults actually, people of all ages, will be able to use to help them learn things they find difficult, particularly things like maths and science, to encourage more and more people to get into that world. So that I do think it will change. In terms of the job and education, we have to tackle it at all levels. We have to tackle it at, yes, of course we've got to make sure that primary schools, kids learn about what the digital, how to be safe in the digital world, what it means, what is AI, you have to learn these concepts. But as we can't just start there, and we have to be looking at the whole spectrum of education. In secondary schools, we've got to get more kids interested in, certainly in the UK, I think you do it here in Singapore better than we do. We've got to get more kids interested in science. We have to, every person who goes to university should have come out knowing about data science and AI. And we must create environments in which, whether it's face-to-face or online, people who are threatened with the loss of their job or just want to change careers must be able to get the education that they can help them move into jobs. But I don't think there is actually, I want to finish by saying this, the last big industrial revolution gave us the 5-day working week, effectively, gave us weekends. There was no concept of that before, really. And I do think there is a chance of a major social revolution with AI if we get it right, that we could actually have less working time, and we could create an environment where we use the non-working time to be socially constructive. All right, so actually use it to be taking care of other people, helping other people, doing the things that, if we get it right, we could actually get down to a 4-day week and a better social contract.
Can I actually say to that?
Of course.
Because after I teach at NUS, so the way I think about this is that think of the content of education is the product, and the distribution channel is where you go to the classroom. So currently, digital technology did not change the content, did not change the product, but change the distribution channel to be more instantaneous. Wherever you go, you can gain access to the content. But I think a real breakthrough will come when everybody get a different product because we have AI solution. Yeah. I can customize a product or learning content for Steve, for Wendy, everybody will get different product. Yeah. I don't think we are there yet, but we are going to be there. And second thing I want to actually highlight about education, the reason why learning is slow, because you don't get very fast feedback. You write an essay, you submit it, the teacher takes 3 weeks to mark the essay and come back to you. So the learning is slowed down because the feedback is not instantaneous. And giving good feedback real time is not so easy. If someone can figure out the breakthrough in giving feedback in the instantaneous way, we can learn a lot faster and the learning speed will be much faster.
Yeah, and
Okay,
I think that's where the personal tutors come in.
So let me pick up on that point then, because there's a lot of discussion in tech world about precision medicine, personal medicine with genomics and with wearables and this idea of n equals 1. You're articulating, both of you are articulating in some way a personal education platform of n equals 1. It doesn't strike me that that's a technical issue today. Is it purely a societal issue today? There's not a technology limitation to that as far as I can tell.
Steve, you are right. I think it's a combination of both AI and BI, artificial and behavioral insight, because a lot of time, for example, now you have a very comfortable job. If I ask you to learn a new skill set, will you be prepared to learn it? You probably say, no, I don't need a learning because I'm having a nice job. So some AI solution that nudge you in the regular fashion to go for invest in lifelong learning will be very powerful. And they will, based on the information that you read on the news, they know what kind of gap that you have in the knowledge kind of bank.
Yeah.
They will nudge you to learn a new class. So to me, I mean, that will be the ultimate kind of AI Jarvis for your learning for everybody in Singapore, that we all get a Jarvis for learning, constantly to remind you to take right classes. And when you actually say something stupid in front of your guests or your whatever, they say you don't read enough about blockchain, go and read about blockchain. I think it'll be wonderful.
Okay, so this is the behavioral economist in you that's saying
No, I
that-
would say because after the minute, you're going to change because you adopt certain decision that is meaningful for you.
Yeah.
And you got to prepare to do it. If you're not prepared to do it, I can give you the best AI solution. You're not going to do it.
So is this a good use case for how AI in the future can be thought of, which is nudge theory, giving you little 1%
I'll say
incremental...
combine AI and BI. BI is a behavioral insight.
Yeah.
It'll
But
be very powerful.
what we also see there is, I mean, AI is developing so fast, and other technologies are developing fast as well. And people are typically like to stay at the level where they are. You need to nudge them. And what I actually see is that we are at a pace where we need to take care that we're not too fast, that we don't lose people on the way and we really get to class of people who are able to follow that speed and many people who are simply not able to follow the speed. So we need to be very careful and have a very individualized approach that is not expected from everyone to constantly change and adapt to that, because many people can't just do that.
So I want to poke at that for a second, Andreas, and jump in if you'd like, Philippe, and I need to get Dame Wendy's perspective, of course. But if I think about this concept, what's the role of government in that? Because when you talk about we need to be careful, we need to be inclusive, we need to not go too fast, we need the right frameworks, Is that the role of government to ensure inclusivity is achieved? Do we expect good-natured corporates to do the right thing under sort of an ESG philosophy? How do we manifest? We'll agree with it, but how do we make it possible?
I don't believe that this is something that comes from economy. Actually, I believe that this needs to be something also coming from government, or at least give us the right frameworks for us to develop in that. We just talked about these startup approaches, and there is a global race about AI. Every country is focusing on that topic. There are so many national strategies, and it is about speed. And what you do if you ever accelerate is you lose all the other stuff behind. So you don't take care about the ethics stuff because you want to be the first one to deploy a technology. You don't take care about standardization, inclusivity, which is necessary to get maybe a socially good solution in the end, but this slows you down. And if in a global race there are no common standards, which we all agree on, then everyone tries to be the fastest one. So there is a need for, I think, kind of a global agreement on what at least minimum standards we should follow, because otherwise, purely from economy, this will not come, because they are in a competition.
It begs a question that I have, but before I go there, Dame Wendy, did you want to say anything about the role of government in trying to ensure inclusivity is is top of list or high?
It's hugely important. We can't be just government. It has to be everybody.
Yeah.
So, and I think there's also a difference between ethics and morals. Ethics is sort of what society agrees is the right thing to do, but morals are what you believe. And we need to make this a moral issue as well as an ethical issue, all right? I mean, a bit like cigarette smoking or not driving when you're talking on a mobile phone or wearing a seatbelt, and these sorts of things have become moral issues, right? People point to it. So we have to, so industry's got to regulate itself. It's got to, and government has got to. We're going to do things like audit AI and data in companies, and part of the framework's got to be the diversity and inclusion and the socio-technical, the behavioural awareness that people have when they're developing products and adopting AI. So that's what governments will do. They'll set the framework for audits, and then we will have a whole new set of people that get paid to do AI audits. These are the new jobs. Be data check for bias, right? We don't really know how to do this, but we will. We will develop ways to do it. These are the new types of jobs, and they won't be done by the computer science geeks.
Can I just add 2 points? Because to me, the government can really do a lot in one dimension, which is give education to everybody in the digital technology and AI and data science. The second thing I really think is important in denying all the powerful use cases, the voices of everybody need to be heard properly, so that lower the barrier for participation, so everybody can participate freely and define the future of AI application for the entire country. I think that's important, because otherwise they will not be embracing the technology.
All right, so Philippe, I'm going to give you a tough one, but I know you can handle this. So there's a school of thought that says, well, first of all, to state a fact, Canada has been and remains a world leader in research around artificial intelligence. Your co-founder, Yoshua Benijo, and others. But there's a school of thought that says the next wave is deploy, iterate, learn, improve. And so to some extent we can continue doing research, but real advance, if I can use the expression, comes from deploy and iterate. That requires a permissive or open attitude. That requires, in some cases, a liberal use of data to fuel algorithms in order to deploy, improve. So I'd like to just have you help us think about, if we all agree that morality and ethics and frameworks are important, and I think we would all agree, the question then is, it is also true that we have multi-speed adoption, I think, as Andreas was referring to. China has made a decision to be a very assertive leader. Automation, robotics, AI. No right-minded VC is really looking at facial recognition software startups that are not working in China because of the opportunity for deployment. Do you think there's a future in which we will reach some United Nations-like understanding of frameworks and ethics, or is it for the next 10, 20 years sort of everybody sort of does their best and we deal with the consequences, whatever those might be?
Thanks for sending me the softballs. No, I guess it's tempting to make this an East versus West, or a cultural divide. And to an extent, permissive regulatory frameworks will allow these kind of experimentation. But in the end, I think what we should focus on is what's the right process for building the kind of products we as a society want to use in the future, because at the end of the day, this is what will win. It's not, rapid iteration is a part of it. If you get stuck in the lab for too long, it's not good. But at the same time, iteration without looking at what society wants, or doing it under a framework that doesn't correspond to societal values that are in place somewhere, is not going to lead to trustworthy tools that we want to see. Right? Yeah. So this balance, I think, is to an extent depending on governments, depending on academia for research, depending on startups and large companies for the execution, fast iteration, and the deployment at scale. It's depending on all of that. But it mostly depends on all of that coming together under a strong ecosystem and an open and collaborative approach so that what we converge to at the end of the day are products people actually want to use because they trust them.
Okay, so we're out of time, but here's what I'd like to try and summarize. Education, inclusion, diversity are highly prized, and we cannot build trustable, societally acceptable tools and technologies, AI or other for that matter, without improving significantly the diversity and inclusion factor, because heterogeneous teams always build better teams and better companies and better products. We have an opportunity to think about the role of governments, but all of us have an obligation to be clear in our thinking and in our opinion and make that known. And we need to make sure that we don't fear AI, because I think I hope our basic agreement is AI to many ways is inevitable, and we ought to think now about how to make the best use of it to improve the human condition as compared to being fearful of it and trying to run away and assume that it will be fixed or made better by someone else. So I'd like to say thank you, first of all, to amazing people that are making things happen, like Dame Wendy and Tekwa and Philippe and Andreas. So I'd ask you just to join me in saying thank you to them. Thank you, everybody.